Hello and welcome to Develop 2020 Pandemic Edition. My name is Shayleen and I am a freelance character artist from London, and today I am here to talk to you about what the concept doesn't tell you. A little bit about me and my background. I specialise in stylized character art and have worked on titles like Borderlands 3, Spyro the Reignited Trilogy, Heroes of the Storm, and most recently Ratchet & Clank. Today I'm here to talk with you all about how, as 3D artists, we can push the depth of our characters to the next level when the concept doesn't tell us everything that we need to know. So how can we make this the best that we possibly can so that our clients and teammates can pat us on the head? As we all know, a concept is a visual representation of a design and/or mood that is used as a blueprint to convey the overall vision of a specific element, environment, or world. So easy, right? If it doesn't tell me everything I need to know, then I can just ask, right? Well, yes and no. So as a freelance artist, and if you're working on your own personal projects, often we don't have direct contact with the concept artists to quell our burning desire for more information. Usually I don't have access to more than a 3/4 view of a design, and at worst have just gotten a screenshot of a previous design from a previous game that was 10 years old as my only point of reference. So a tiny disclaimer here, all of the illustrations I'm about to show aren't supposed to be used as concepts. They are just to convey an idea and not really to be modeled from. So I'm not picking at these designs in particular, but I wanted to pick something that I loved and represented the level of detail that I typically get from a client or when I'm picking something for my own projects. A loose brown stroke for a belt, sash, or a rope here, neck piece that I can't seem to pin down from anything that I've seen before, and a simple silhouette sketch for the boots, where the foot part of the boot is very nondescript. How about some crazy cool hair without an explanation on how that may look in the back, or no back view at all? To top it all off, no breakdown of examples of what materials may look like or how things might be constructed. I do prefer flat color when working from concepts, as it's easy to work with without rendering getting in the way to confuse the important information. But is that metal or plastic, a button or an embroidered patch? Armed with inquiry and determination to do our best, how can we better prepare and advance upon the concept art to make our characters shine beyond our blueprints? What fundamental knowledge can we use to turn the blank spaces into an opportunity? So like anything, we start with reference. We already know that we can't live without it, as it's the pillar in our pipeline for making anything look believable. With the concept as our only source of reference, I typically spend about half a day or so collecting various resources and sketch over the concept itself to fill in any of the previously mentioned holes. An artist called, I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher this, Gianluca Gimini, I am very sorry, asked various strangers to draw him a bike as accurately as they could, something that we see and most likely interact with daily during their commutes, to prove just how much our brains trick us into thinking that we know something when we really don't. Of course, most people's designs didn't work. They would break if somebody were to sit on them, and they wouldn't complete their core functions like being able to turn a wheel. Even though as artists we study the things around us rather than just looking at them like the general public, I still hear a lot of people aren't using references for key items like the direction of a belt buckle. Now, I'm not perfect, I get these things wrong too, but what do we do when we don't know what to look for? When we don't know the name of a type of watch or a dress? What do we look up when something is new, futuristic, and imaginary? Simply, we just expand our mental library. Fashion itself is an endless, untapped resource in games. There is more out there than just a t-shirt, a spaghetti strap top vest, and the same straight-legged jean when it comes to streetwear. Why is understanding fashion and garment creation so important? Well, 9 times out of 10, our characters are wearing clothes. Clothing is something that's made and constructed by someone or something, just like a piece of technology or a mech would be. And we need to treat it with the same amount of care and research to convincingly recreate it. What types of necklines are there? Various types of skirt, the cut on a pair of jeans, the importance of darting your clothing correctly, different types of lapels for different occasions and styles of jackets. There are so many different collar types. We could get lost in the lists. What are the differences between a trench coat and a wrap coat, or a trench coat that you would see today versus a trench coat from the early 1900s? What key characteristics differ them from each other? A newer maker trench coat may not have a storm flap or a back vent used to keep the rain dripping from the shoulders down and into the jacket, as we make ours now from a lighter, more weather-resistant fabric. The cut would be more flattering than an older jacket made for war. The type of fabric would vary also, as we have more access to a variety of fabrics pretty cheaply, more so than back in the 1900s. Trench coats were typically worn in the military, whereas now they're a fashionable classic. What about if something is imaginary, as most concepts are? Well, we do what all great artists do. We steal. By using our fundamental knowledge about fashion and garment creation, we can use existing silhouettes, patterns, and rules that are here to inform and strengthen our choices. The concept isn't going to tell us these things. These are the things that we as character artists are specialized to know. We can take the lessons that we've learned from the trench coat, why parts like the storm flap exist and why, then apply them to the new exciting designs to ground them in a reality we already recognize. Let's pretend that there's only a front view of this jacket. The concept team has a lot to do, and now it's in our hands to figure out the rest. They've informed us that it is a trench coat, with design elements like the storm flap, the large utility-style pockets to the sides, and a popped Napoleon collar. So what else can we add to it to make it more of a trench coat from the future? As we can see in red, they've added rivets to resemble the large amount of buttons on a trench coat that are typically used to keep the weather away from your body, and the paneling to mimic a certain type of elements like epaulettes. I personally would have added a yoke on the back to add structure, and I've indicated that in green, and it would just further help push the look, but that's me. By understanding the construction of a garment, we can also avoid uncomfortable mistakes like tacky from Soul Calibur, where there's no construction or fabric type suggested to convince us that her breast socks are feasible. I understand that this is an extreme case, but by understanding how fabric hugs the body, how darts are used for fuller figures to allow for a curvy but fitted look, we can still create a flattering but believable clothing, much like with this cosplay version of tacky here. With the rise of Marvelous Designer in our workflows, it has become more important than ever to understand how a garment is constructed and the relationship between a 2D design and what needs to be done to fit the body in a flattering way. It doesn't end here though, she has more to say. The importance of having an interest in garments and fashion also helps to set visual rules for any elements we need to add to the design, as a subculture and time period will also have an effect on your creations. For example, you have a preppy character concept, and the concept has a rough drawn shape for a belt, and as the preppy style is all about being clean cut, clear, high quality, mummy bought me a yacht kind of expensive, laced with sophistication, you wouldn't put a large look at me here, chunky, sparkly belt buckle at their waist, or a lace-up flat-heeled boot. The concept may not be clear on what shoes that they're wearing, but they're clear about the fashion subculture or style that they're trying to describe, and we should be tuned in to follow their lead. When designing Sakura, I had a very limited resource of images to work from. The outfit that I had chosen, although my favorite, only features in the anime for a few minutes and once in the manga for a few cells. Luckily, she had a full-page illustration, but how can I develop these visuals further and follow the designer's lead? First, as we may have guessed, the clothes. I know that Sakura's fashion is usually of a Lolita subculture, but she needs to still have some elements of practicality shining through, as she is a very active preteen fighting crime. So there's my starting point. Looking at the silhouette of the dress, I know that it's a mixture between a Japanese sailor uniform and a bell dress with a stiff bone skirt to resemble an umbrella. Lolitas have a very strict set of rules, and it all stems from being doll-like and modest. Everything I did from here on out had to follow the Lolita rules, enough that it was recognizable as their subculture while supporting Sakura's athletic needs. The concept is pretty vague and nondescript when it came to her shoes. What was under her skirt, because with her flying around, I do have to consider her modesty. And what did the back of her dress look like? Following the rules and the lead of the concept, At first, I gave her sports shorts underneath her dress, inspired by her athletic background. But the rules of a Lolita is all about doll-like modesty, so bloomers better fit the aesthetic, and they're still pretty practical. For the boots, I referenced high-top sneakers, but gave her a durable sole so that she can use them for some real grip. And then the back of her dress, I just followed the lead of the front and continued the sailor uniform style. Her dress is constructed like a belle dress with princess seams for a dainty but darted look to keep it tight to her young frame, but still flattering and suitable for her age, drawing the eyes upwards towards her face. Everything we've learnt about fashion and exposing ourselves to different fashion genres and subcultures will only push the design from just being some cloth to an outfit that feels tangible and real without it having to be a cloth simulation or realistic in style. An amazing resource that I recently picked up is the Fashion Encyclopedia. Inside is an incredible comprehensible guide and a breakdown of different everyday clothing items, what the different elements are called, where to find them, how they're constructed. I highly recommend for you to pick one up if you could, and if you want to explore this topic deeper with cute illustrations and diagrams. So now that I've talked your ears off about clothing, it's time to make it dynamic and full of interest without overcrowding the eye. It's all about creating an impact. I don't like having expansive blank spaces of one hue or one type of fabric or value. It just seems flat and dull in my opinion. So the next big thing in my process is about adding an impactful amount of variation in my surfaces. By impactful, I don't mean in-your-face rainbow stripes here and white polka dots there. I mean applying variation in places that have meaning and impact without overpowering any other element. Value is to help elements stand out against each other. If your piece is looking flat, quite often it is the value of the object. Simply turning it to black and white will help you identify problem areas. Hue is your local color. Often when adding gradients or variations in hue, people will shift the value up and down in the color wheel. I urge people to stop and think about how we're mixing color. We all know a crow's feathers aren't black. They're peppered with blues, purples, and greens. Try to apply the same theory to your own local colors. If a shirt is red, mix in some purples in the cavities and shift the hue to yellow to add light, depth, and a sense of physicality to your textures. Or use the hue to draw the eye upwards. For Sakura's dress, it's all yellow. With so much yellow fabric, it was jarring to the eye, so I added a soft reddish hue gradiating up her skirt towards her torso to break up the yellow and softly lead the eye upwards towards her face. Variation in fabric can mean a vinyl next to a cotton, but it can also be done in a softer, more subtle way, like adding a breathable paneling to an overvest or shoes, or having a large ribbed cotton shirt underneath a dense weaved overshirt. Patting can come in many ways that aren't just prints, and the goal is to find a clever solution to break up the surface using subtlety to keep the eye interested and to fight off the temptation of having numerous plain large surfaces. Repetition of a shape or a decal can add cohesion to a piece easily without a lot of effort. At first, all these elements feel like too much to list at once, but used in key areas, it can really make the difference and enhance the overall look of the model. These touches aren't usually designed in the concept, they're choices that we make. So now that we have our variation, it's time for depth. I could also call this grounding your design in reality, as these touches make each element feel like they're interacting with each other, as if they sit in a physical plane. I learnt this by watching cosplayers and how they like to paint their armor, with gradients, dark washes, and edgeware. I've touched on gradients a little bit before, but basically I like to use one large gradient over the whole model where the bottom is 20% darker than the top to keep the key contrast at the top half of the model and the eye focused in on the face, basically like they do in Dota, but also to add variation in hue as a gradient on each element so that they feel as though they're overlapping one another. In my experience, I don't like the lights and the AO in the game engine to do all of the work for me. It's too unpredictable. I like to have some control over the effect by adding soft linear gradients where elements overlap each other to add depth and separation between them, more so if they're the same local color. Dark washes are a concept that I've personally seen in cosplay, and it's in most model making too. It's typically a light diluted wash of paint used to get pigment in all of the crevices of a model. What I like to use this concept as is by creating a gradient that helps to shade key colored areas of the armor towards the lightest point in the center. I use this more prominently in hand-painted work, but I love the depth and contrast it creates with such complex pieces. It accentuates the form that already exists and gives it an effortless, tactile, handmade feeling. I'll also make these areas more rough in the specular so that they pick up less light, adding to the accentuation of form. Edge wear is something that we all know. It's natural or impacted damage that occurs when the surface collides, rubs, or wears away over time. With programs like Substance Painter, this is easier than ever to replicate, but it's up to us to use these masks as just a guide so that we can further develop the look to be more natural and only allowing it to be in key visually impactful areas. The software doesn't know that this place is hidden from being hit, so it's going to apply damage there anyway. We have to make the choice of where it is applied. So now that we have our clothing looking tasty, where's the icing for our already pretty incredible cake? What can we do to give them a cohesive image and story? Branding. Branding is something I've become very passionate about when building and designing my own characters. Everyone wears some kind of brand. If it's a sports label, a gaming shirt, Beats headphones, they all say something about the wearer and have their own visual language and style. This doesn't just mean a logo. This could be in the shape, in the types of fabrics used, or the color. Doc Martens have a signature yellow stitching and a tab, and it all adds to some kind of branding. You can use branding to make a whole garment collectively look designed by one company or person, or something more casual by mixing brands and prints. For Sakura, her outfit is custom made for her by her friend Tomoyo. Tomoyo's mother also owns her own tech and toy company. I know she's a pretty incredible woman, but Sakura's goals all needed to look custom made for her with Tomoyo's brand. Wings, circles, Sakura's name, and repetitive shapes from her lace reflected in the print of her chest, it all makes it look like one brand. You could also make something look functional and industrial in nature with branding. Warning stickers, serial numbers, barcodes, all of these things add to the brand of your character and tell a wider narrative in a non-obstructive way. It's the cherry on top, the finesse to our moves, and basically our secret weapon. So the face, the most important part really. Faces are what we're all connected to in a person. It tells us the most about who they are, where they're from, how are they feeling. It's the most important part and arguably the best part of making a character. Painting a face could make and break everything. Hue variations to breathe life into flesh. Even stylized faces, we have blues, reds, yellows, and purples in the textures. Imperfections and blemishes like freckles or moles, bags under the eyes or scars. These are things we don't consciously think about when looking at a person's face, but they all make up who they are and they tell a story. Fundamentally, what I want to talk about is the importance of exploring topics like makeup when working with characters and what other mediums like doll painting have taught me. This isn't the early 2000s or the 1940s anymore. Pencil-thin eyebrows and a full inner lash eyeliner isn't the trend and hasn't been for a very long time. Please find attached to this presentation a link to a petition to stop this madness. Like fashion, culture and time have a big part to play in makeup. Currently, the West is all about pigment and drama, enhancing your features beyond the norm. Whereas the East is more about subtle, soft, light pigmentation to enrich a natural look rather than push it to its limits. Putting a currently Western look of a deep smoky eye with a cut crease wouldn't work on a game set in current Korea or a game set in the 1800s where eye makeup typically just wasn't worn. A smoky eye also typically closes the eye and makes it look much smaller. So think about how the makeup and your use of it can affect the illusion of the face when you can't figure out why your eyes look droopy, why they look small, or why they might be too heavy, because the model and the sculpt is fine. It's just your use of makeup. A good brow is hard to find. I can say that I've been battling with mine for years, but knowing how brows have evolved and how different cultures have different shapes naturally is important to anchoring the face in reality. Did anyone see the wavy trend going around? I think it was like 2 years ago. I have no idea where it came from, but I love it and I wish it will come back. So, ombre soft arches or a dramatic brow are more of a Western trend, whereas a soft filled straight brow is more typically Eastern. A lot of mainland European countries like a natural brow, so it's key to keep these things in mind. And obviously these are sweeping generalizations. It depends on the person, the subculture that they're a part of, how people express themselves, what they have access to. But this is just very big, common trend generalizations. Makeup tutorials are pretty hard to miss. Find a few beauty gurus that you can watch and learn the differences. I assure you that you can learn a lot from them about how to create a convincing look. Or at least you can have fun sipping some piping hot tea with the drama circling around right now. Learning about makeup doesn't just mean developing skills in eyeshadows and lipsticks. Contouring can teach us a lot about painting a face in general. Makeup artists are trying to do the same thing as us. They're adding form and tricking the eye into seeing angles in a face that aren't there from a blank canvas. Using light red hued browns to make the face seem smaller, putting highlights in places to make the face look plumper and dewy, mattifying others so that they don't distract from the money-making spots. Pushing and pulling form at will is a feat to be admired, and we can learn a lot from them. If you want to find a guru to look into, I would recommend Tina Young, as she has some great tutorials and explanations about the basics of makeup. Her contouring American versus Korean makeup are probably some of the more informative that I've seen. Most importantly, makeup is a form of self-expression for all walks of life, and we seem to forget about it in games. It shouldn't be dismissed or underappreciated when working with characters and people. Some people use it to show how they feel on the inside, to be unique and to stand out, to enhance what they have, or to bring out a side of them that they otherwise couldn't. It's a big part of our culture, and yet it feels sorely missed in our designs. Love, Death and Robots is an incredible example of how makeup is used to express a person's personality and what subculture of fashion that they're a part of. Although extreme, I would still love to see games play with the creativity of makeup like they have much more often. That isn't just a silver eyeshadow because they're in space. As artists, we have the incredible thirst to find inspiration everywhere. We source and recycle what we learn in our work every day, and that should shine through in everything that we do. Recreating the concept and using it as an excuse to only go halfway can't be where it ends. I always want to go to the extra mile for something, and I enjoy achieving results that me and my clients can be happy with. With the passion for details, focused research, and dedication, no one will ultimately realize the skill and knowledge that we have and how it's sunken into the work that we create. But they will just feel it, and they'll be connected with it compared to something without. Thank you very much for listening to my talk and for spending your time with us. I hope that you have a good rest of your day. And if you would like to ask me any questions or want to talk about these topics in depth anymore, you can find me on Twitter at UnicornDevGames. My DMs are open for literally anything that you may want to ask. So thank you very much.